We saw in our last recording that Peter, James and John had a brief glimpse of God's kingdom with Jesus as the centre, shining like the sun. We'll now read Luke chapter 9, verses 37 to 45. On the next day, when they'd come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. And behold, a man from the crowd cried out, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he's my only child, and behold, a spirit seizes him, and he suddenly cries out. It convulses him so that he foams at the mouth and shatters him, and will hardly leave him. And I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not." Jesus answered, "O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon threw him to the ground and convulsed him. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit and healed the boy and gave him back to his father. And all were astonished at the majesty of God. But while they were all marveling at everything he was doing, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let these words sink into your ears. The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men." But they did not understand this saying, and it was concealed from them so that they might not perceive it. And they were afraid to ask him about this saying. So Jesus, with Peter, James and John, came down from the mountain. They'd had a brief glimpse of God's kingdom with Jesus there as the centre, but now it was back to life with the people. A great crowd were waiting, and there were problems. Previously, the 12 disciples had been given power to heal the sick and to free people from evil spirits. But the 9 disciples that Jesus had left behind when he went up the mountain, well, they'd failed. We read in Mark's account of this incident that the disciples were arguing with the scribes. They were the religious leaders who were employed to copy the scriptures and other religious writings. The disciples had failed to free a boy from an evil spirit. So there at the bottom of the hill, there was a distraught man with a boy possessed by an evil spirit. There was an argument going on between disciples and scribes. There was a large crowd there, and the people were undoubtedly discontented. The 9 disciples would have been embarrassed and defensive. It was all disorder. Jesus comes to them and displays his majestic power. He did what the disciples failed to do. He freed the boy from the evil spirit and gave him back to his father. Order returned, and everyone was astonished. Jesus immediately spoke to his disciples again. He'd shown his wonderful power yet again, but the disciples needed to get rid of the idea that he was going to set up his kingdom and rule on earth at that time. He'd already explained this to them, but they had trouble taking it in. "Let this sink into your ears," he said. "The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men." When he spoke of the Son of Man, as he often did, he was speaking of himself. That was a title that he had. He was to be delivered into the hands of men. He was reminding them of what he had told them previously, that he would suffer many things, be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed. The disciples still didn't grasp what he was saying, and they were afraid to ask him about it. Well, here's something for us to think about. I wonder whether the disciples were afraid to ask in case what the Lord Jesus said was as serious as it seemed to be. It is possible for us to avoid truth because we're afraid. We're afraid the truth may change things that we don't want changed. Don't you think this shows a lack of trust in the Lord Jesus?